Okay, so we're back and we've just loaded up Traktor, which you can probably just see there in the background. And if you look at the players, they've actually just come to life in terms of a bit of LED feedback and stuff there. And that doesn't happen in the default working of the system. It's because we're using a slightly different TSI file to get these particular features up and running. I'll show you how those work later on, but for the meanwhile, what I want to do is show you how to make sure that Traktor is now able to go and talk to the sound card, in this case the X1600 mixer. So to do that, you need to go into preferences. You can do it a couple of ways. You can either press command comma, or you just click on this this gear icon over here, the preferences button, and actually click on that once, and then basically just zoom back out a bit. And then yes, so then over on the left hand side you'll get what we call the preferences pane. It's a little bit on the small side. You are able to drag and make it bigger now. It's one of the things they introduced in the recent release of Traktor. I can't remember which one it was. It was either 2.5 or 2.6. Anyway, if we go in here, I'll just zoom in a bit again. So we've got lots of different options. Too many to worry about just for the moment, but here, audio setup. So if I click once in there, okay, so what we've got now, if you can see there, I've got audio device, and I've got lots of different audio devices to choose from. Because I'm using the mixer sound card, that's the one I want, Denon X1600 Core Audio. So I click on that. I need to make sure that sample rate matches what we saw on the Denon X1600 earlier. If you remember, when we looked down here and we were in the utilities playing around, we saw the 44.1 kilohertz. We need to make sure that whatever value you had on the Denon mixer matches what's on this particular sample rate page there. The latency, you can play with this if you want. I find 512 works quite well for my particular setup. The latency just basically controlling how responsive your key presses and the audio is going to be when you're actually playing stuff through. And the lower, obviously, the more responsive, but then the more stress you put in your computer, and you might start to get clicks and pops and distortion in your audio. So you need to kind of set this as low as you can without that particular kind of audio soup happening. Okay, so if you get any pops and clicks, that's one of the first things to check. This latency set in, increase it if necessary, and also double check that your sample rate is matching what your sound card is capable of outputting. Okay, so that's the audio setup section. The next section down we have is output routing. Okay, now I mentioned before I'm using the Denon X1600 mixer in internal mode. Okay, because I'm in internal mode, I have here, the top section is the monitor. This is my headphone output, okay, as channels 3 and 4. Okay, you can ignore where it says front, center, low frequency. That's just irrelevant for the purposes. Just concentrate on the numbers 3 and 4. And the output master, i.e. the signal that's going to be going to the main speakers through the amp, that's set to 1 and 2. Okay, the reason it works just in this simple kind of concept here is because, again, I'm using the Denon X1600. I'm using it in master mode. Don't know if you can quite see that there. Let's move the camera properly. Yeah, exactly, right. So you see here I've got master and I've got channel. Okay, because I'm in master mode, that's why I only need to have the 4 particular channels set up here, 3 and 4 for my headphones, 1 and 2 for the speakers. Okay. If I had gone into external mode, just so you can see for reference, if I do go into external mode there, then you can see straight away I've now got, you know, options to actually route through channels to different ports, I should say, or channels themselves on the X1600 mixer. Okay, and in here, again, ignore the actual text of the descriptions there. The main thing's the numbers. So what that's basically saying is that 1 and 2 here relates to what's going to happen on channel 1 over here. Okay, the first channel on your Denon mixer. Channels 3 and 4 there exactly deck A are going to be in the middle. Okay, so if you think of basically line 1 being 1 and 2, line 2 being 3 and 4, line 3 being 5 and 6, and line 4 being 7 and 8, then that's what these particular numbers here would relate to if you're in external mode. Although that's by default, you can obviously use the options here to drag and drop and change them to whatever configuration you want. So a lot of flexibility there. Again, I'm not going into that level of complexity. I'm just using internal mode, a lot more straightforward to actually do things. Okay, so just click on that. Right, make sure it's left as it was. Okay, so the other option now is input routing. Just make sure that's there. Right, exactly. So input routing, again, because I'm using master mode, they can basically all be set the same. Okay, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2 for all the decks. It's not going to make any difference because the X1600 is in master mode. All the audio is going to be routed through one particular channel out to my amp. Okay, so that's all I really need to do on that particular section. Okay, so the other thing I want to show you here before we leave is the controller manager. Okay, and controller manager is where all the magic happens. It's the glue between the hardware, i.e. in this case the SC2900s and the X1600, is the glue between that and the Traktor software, okay, to tell it how to translate keys and button presses and fader pushes and knob turns on your Denon products or whatever particular controllers you're using into something that Traktor can understand. So what do you mean by controller manager? Well, controller manager is basically a library of all of the control setting files. We call them TSI files. And if you look just here where it says device, a device is basically relating to anything which can talk to Traktor, for want of a better word. So by default, we're looking at a generic keyboard device, which is basically talking about this guy here. So it's a very simple mapping. All it's saying here is three things. I can use a particular key combination, in this case the comma and a full stop, to load previous and next files in a playlist, and I can set a particular lock on a file just by pressing, in this case, the L key, if you can just see there. Okay, so again, if you need more information on how you actually define and create mappings, there's plenty of documentation and tutorials out there on how to do it, and there's also a good website called traktorbible.com. Rainer H has got a lot of useful information on there which tells you how to build these guys up. But just a very simple example there of how you can actually set up a TSO file just off your keyboard to, in this case, load particular tracks and lock them once you've finished setting your beat grids. Not really worried about that for the moment. What I want to show you is, if I drop down, I've got quite a few different pre-loaded TSI files. Okay, so each one of these entries, if I move the mouse down, each one of these entries contains a number of different instructions which will control how these particular units, if I zoom out again, sorry, how these particular units will actually send and receive data to the Traktor software. So if I can just show you quickly an example, I don't know if you can see just up there, underneath the generic keyboard device, I've got what we call an SC2900 Deck A and an SC2900 Deck B map. Okay, and what those basically do is each one controls, as it suggests, a particular SC2900 in terms of the inputs and outputs. And by inputs, I'm talking about obviously the key presses and fade and moves and adjustments. By outputs, I'm talking about the LED display in terms of, do I want this particular button to light up in green, do I want it to blink, do I want it to do something. The inputs and outputs are all defined in that particular entry for Deck A. There's a second one there for Deck B. Okay, and why is that important to have two like this? Well, if I go and click on the first one there, for example, which is the SC2900 Deck A, and what you'll find is actually it's just loaded up now. So the device has got the name. I can see here it's got in and out ports all targeted to this device, which is Deck A. If I wanted to change it, I could move it to Deck B, Deck C, Deck D instead, but obviously I want it to stay with Deck A. Now if you look down here, you can see there's a ton of different commands. Okay, And again, I'm not really going to go into that. But what is core is where it says mapped to. And you can see here it says channel 01. Okay. Now, if you remember earlier, when we checked on this particular device, we made sure that the MIDI channel was set to 1. Okay. That's important so that anything in this particular mapping, this particular TSI file, everything is designed and related to channel 1. If you see, I'm scrolling through, and everything is either receiving or sending out information to the MIDI channel 1. Okay. So that is how that particular mapping knows to receive data only from this particular device. Okay. Now, if you compare and contrast that to, we're going to go now and pick the second TSI file there, which is for the SC2900 Deck B. So yeah, the second TSI file there. And what will happen when that one loads in? So you can see there now I've got the Deck B as the option there. And again, a lot of information here. Just scroll back, a lot of stuff. Basically, it's identical to the other TSI file, except for, if you can see there, it says channel 2. Okay, so that means everything on this particular TSI file is going to be sending and receiving MIDI channel data on channel 2. Okay, and if you remember, that's why we made sure that when we went into the settings over here for the MIDI channel, we put that to point, or to channel 2, I should say. So anytime I like click the play button, move this fader, do something on that particular device, it will be talking to that particular channel. Okay, channel 2. And just so you can see the final piece of the puzzle, just go on there, and you've got there the DJ Semi X1600 generic MIDI TSI file. So that is a TSI file dedicated to taking MIDI inputs and signals from this mixer. Okay, and now we have this device loaded up. There he is there, and again, slightly different commands because obviously the mixer is doing something different to what the actual SC2900 units are doing. But you can see here that this is talking about channel 3. Okay, and if you remember before, we had the input and the output for the MIDI channels set to channel 3 on the Denon X1600. Okay, so that was a little bit about TSI files and how you get your Denon hardware talking to Traktor Scratch. What I'm going to do now quickly is show you how everything works up and running. Alright, see you in a bit. Bye.